Before Eve, there was another, a woman who refused to bow. And for that, they transformed her into the demon that has haunted humanity for millennia. There are names that were never meant to be spoken, names that scribes whispered in the darkness of monastery cells, only to burn the parchments at dawn, names that scholars discovered in crumbling tablets, then spent lifetimes trying to forget. Close your eyes. What I'm about to show you was hidden for 3,000 years. In the shadow corners of Isaiah, chapter 34, buried beneath translations and retranslations, lies a single word that changes everything we thought we knew about the beginning of humanity. The Hebrew text speaks of desolation, of a kingdom reduced to ruins where only wild creatures dwell. And there, among the jackals and ostriches, among the wild cats and hyenas, she rests, Lilith. But who dares speak this name? Most translations replace it with night creatures or screech owls, safe, sanitized words that hide the truth. The ancient Greek Septuagint called her anocentaurs, half-human, half-beast. The Latin Vulgate transformed her into Lamia, a child-devouring seductress from pagan mythology. They all knew what they were hiding. Open your eyes now. Look at what remains. From the 3rd millennium before Christ, her name echoes through Mesopotamian tablets. Lilitu in ancient Akkadian, Lilu in its masculine form. Spirits of the desert, bringers of fever and delirium, masters of the threshold between life and death. The Sumerian king list from 2400 BCE tells us that the mighty Gilgamesh himself was born of a Lilu. In the epic poem Gilgamesh and the Haluppa Tree, our hero battles a Lilith who had possessed a sacred tree belonging to the goddess Inanna, a tree planted since the dawn of creation itself. But these are not random myths scattered across time. These are breadcrumbs, leading us back to a truth so dangerous that it was systematically erased from the sacred texts. In Phoenician Canaanite amulets, we find desperate incantations. "O you who fly in the darkened one, depart at once, O Lilith." These were carved by mothers protecting their newborns, by communities who knew that she moved in the spaces between worlds, in the moments when life hung in the balance. The terror relief, discovered in southern Iraq in 1924, but dating back nearly 4,000 years, shows a winged figure with talon feet, surrounded by owls and lions, creatures of the night, guardians of the threshold. Some say it depicts Inanna. Others claim it shows Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld. But scholars whisper a third name, Lilith. Why hide her? Why transform a name into shadows, a being into whispers? Because she remembers what they made us forget. But to understand what they feared, we must journey back to the very moment of creation itself. Place your hand over your heart. Feel it beating. This rhythm, it remembers, in the beginning, there were 2 creation stories, 2 different accounts of humanity's birth, written centuries apart, woven together by scribes who thought no one would notice the contradiction. But the contradiction is where the truth lives. Genesis chapter 1. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Male and female, at the same time, from the same divine breath, equal. But then comes Genesis chapter 2, and suddenly the story changes. Suddenly, man is alone. Suddenly, woman is an afterthought, carved from his rib while he sleeps, designed to be his helper, his subordinate. For 2,000 years, biblical scholars have wrestled with this inconsistency. Philo of Alexandria tried to harmonize them through Platonic philosophy. Medieval rabbis created elaborate explanations. Modern theologians dance around the contradiction with careful words and footnotes. But some ancient readers saw a different truth hidden in plain sight. What if these weren't contradictory accounts of the same event? What if they were sequential? What if Genesis 1 describes the creation of Adam and his first wife, a woman formed from the same clay, in the same moment, with the same divine spark? Breathe deeply. Can you smell the earth of Eden? Her name appears nowhere in Genesis, but in the spaces between the words, in the silence between the verses, she waits. the woman who stood as Adam's equal, the woman who knew no subordination because she was never created to serve. The rabbis of the Middle Ages called her Lilith. Think about it. In the first creation, God doesn't put Adam to sleep. There's no rib, no surgical procedure, no hierarchy established through the method of creation, just divine intention. Male and female, he created them. Two beings, same source, same moment, same status. But somehow, this first woman vanishes from a narrative. Between Genesis 1 verse 27 and Genesis 2 verse 7. She disappears completely. The story jumps forward, starts over, and suddenly Adam is alone again, waiting for Eve to be carved from his sleeping body. Where did she go? Ancient Jewish texts whisper the answer. She refused the subordination that was expected. She would not accept being below when she had been created as an equal. And so she was erased, removed from the official story, transformed into something else entirely. The first rebellion was not about an apple. It was about equality. The alphabet of Ben Sirach, a medieval Jewish text, dares to tell her story directly. God created both man and woman from the earth. The man was Adam, and the woman was Lilith. But they could not coexist, not because of incompatibility, but because of expectation. Society demanded hierarchy where creation had established equality. Feel the weight of this truth. Every time you've been told that women were created to serve, remember this. There was another creation story, one where male and female stood side by side from the very first breath, one where partnership, not dominance, was a divine design. She was not Adam's rib. She was his mirror. She was not his helper. She was his equal. And when the world demanded she become less than what she was created to be, she chose exile over submission. But exile to where? And what transformed an equal into the demon of nightmares? Before she was a demon, she was a goddess. Close your eyes. We're going back. Further than Abraham. Further than Moses. Back to where the rivers first divided the earth. For 1,000 years before Christ walked the earth, in the cradle of civilization between the Tigris and Euphrates, they knew her name. They carved it into clay tablets that would outlast empires. They whispered it in birthing chambers and spoke it at the threshold of death. Lilith, the night wind, the desert storm, the space between breath and silence. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, she appears as a force of nature itself. The sacred Hulapu tree, planted by the goddess Inanna at the world's creation, becomes her dwelling place. This was no ordinary tree. It was meant to become Inanna's throne, her seat of divine power. But while the tree grew, 3 creatures claimed it. A dragon coiled around its roots, a giant bird nested in its crown, and in the trunk's hollow heart, Lilith made her home. When Gilgamesh came with his axe to serve Inanna, the dragon fled, the bird took flight, but Lilith tore down her house with her own hands and fled to the wilderness. Even then, she chose the desert over submission. This is her pattern. Always at the threshold. Always in the spaces between civilized and wild, between tame and free. Feel the sand between your fingers. This is her domain. Mesopotamian mothers carve her image into amulets, not to worship, but to ward off. They knew she moved in the dangerous hours, in the moments when life balanced on a knife's edge. During childbirth, when death and life dance together. In the deep of night, when the vulnerable called out into darkness. O you who fly in the darkened room, depart at once, O Lilith. But why did they fear her? What transformed the goddess into a terror? The answer lies in power. Lilith represented something that civilized societies couldn't control. Feminine power that refused to be contained, channeled, or subordinated. She was sexuality without shame, motherhood without marriage, strength without permission. The queen of the night relief, that magnificent terracotta sculpture found in Iraq, shows her in her full glory. Winged, Talon crowned, flanked by owls and standing upon lions. This is not a cowering demon. This is sovereignty itself. But sovereignty, especially feminine sovereignty, threatens order. And so the stories changed. The goddess became a child stealer. The protector became the predator. The equal became the enemy. When you cannot destroy power, you demonize it. Watch how it happens across cultures. The Celtic Morrigan becomes a harbinger of doom. The Hindu Kali becomes terrifying destruction. The Norse Hel becomes a ruler of the dead. Powerful feminine archetypes are systematically transformed from complex deities into simple monsters. Open your eyes now. See the pattern. Lilith's transformation follows the same arc. From the Mesopotamian tablets to the Jewish amulets, we can trace her journey from deity to demon. Each generation that tells her story strips away more of her complexity, more of her power, until all that remains is fear. By the time she reaches rabbinical literature, she has become pure threat, a seductress who visits men in their sleep, a child killer who haunts birthing chambers, a demon of the desert who embodies every fear about uncontrolled feminine power. But here's what they couldn't erase. Even in their demonization, they preserve her essential nature. She remained free. She remained uncaptured. She remained equal. The ancient incantation bowls found throughout Babylonia try to bind her with contracts and divorce decrees, as if she were a wife who could be legally dismissed. Take your letter of divorce and depart from this house. But you cannot divorce what was never married. You cannot dismiss what was never subordinate. She simply refused. And it was this refusal that would echo through millennia until it reached the most dangerous moment of all, when she demanded equality in Eden itself. Prepare yourself. What you're about to witness was never meant to be recorded. In the beginning, they were equal. The alphabet of Ben Sira dares to tell us what happened in those first moments after creation, when Adam and Lilith stood together in Eden, still carrying the dust of their making. They quarreled immediately, but not about fruit, not about serpents, not about divine commandments. They quarreled about position. I will not lie beneath you, she said. I will not lie beneath you, he replied, for you are fit to be beneath and I to be above. In that moment, that single crystalline moment, the entire future of human relationships hung in the balance. Two beings, created equal, faced with the first choice that would define everything that followed: submit or resist, hierarchy or partnership, order or freedom. Feel the weight of this choice. Lilith looked at Adam, her equal in creation, her twin in the divine image, and she spoke the words that would echo through eternity. We are equal, for we both come from the earth. But Adam would not yield, and Lilith would not break. What happened next was either the first sin or the first act of liberation, depending on who tells the story. She spoke the ineffable name of God. In Jewish tradition, the Tetragrammaton, the true name of the divine, carries such power that even today, observant Jews write it as GD, afraid complete the sacred word. To speak it was to access the fundamental force of creation itself. And Lilith spoke it. The moment the sacred syllables left her lips, she rose into the air, not flying like a bird, not floating like a spirit, but rising like truth itself. Unstoppable and absolute, she flew toward the Red Sea. Some freedoms can only be won through exile. God sent 3 angels after her: Sinoi, Sansonoi, and Samanjalov. Their names are preserved in countless Jewish amulets, their images carved into protective talismans that mothers hung over their children's beds. The angels found her at the Red Sea, that liminal space between slavery and freedom, between the known and the unknowable, and they delivered heaven's ultimatum. Listen carefully. This is the choice that defined everything. Return Adam, or 100 of your children will die each day. Her response reveals everything about who she truly was. She refused, even facing the death of her own offspring, even threatened with drowning in the very sea that would later part for Moses. She chose freedom over submission. Leave me alone, she declared. I was created only to cause sickness to infants. If the infant is male, I have dominion over him for 8 days after birth. If female, for 20 days. But this was not surrender. This was defiant acceptance of the role they had forced upon her. If they would make her a demon for refusing subordination, then she would be a demon. If they would transform her into a child threat for demanding equality, then she would embody that threat. But she made one final bargain, one last gesture toward protective nature they had tried to strip from her. Whenever I see the names of the three angels or their images, I will harm no child. And so the pattern was established. Every day, 100 of her demon children would die. The price of her freedom, paid in perpetual loss. But she would remain free. She would remain equal. She would remain herself. Feel the cost of refusing to bow. The rabbis who recorded this story thought they were explaining Jewish protective rituals. Why mothers made amulets. Why babies needed special guarding. Why houses required spiritual cleansing. They thought they were cataloging folk practices and ancient superstitions. They didn't realize they were preserving the first story of feminist resistance. From that moment forward, Lilith became the shadow wife, the might have been, the path not taken. She haunted the edges of marriage, the spaces between desire and fulfillment, the threshold between submission and rebellion. Men were warned never to sleep alone, lest she visit them in their dreams. Women whisper her name in birthing chambers, both fearing her and understanding her rage. She became the question that no one dared ask aloud. What if Eve had also refused? But her story didn't end in exile. Millennia later, when the world was ready, she would rise again. 1972, the second wave of feminism crashes across America like a long-awaited flood. Open your heart. The awakening has begun. Dr. Judith Plaskow, a Jewish feminist theologian, sits in her study surrounded by ancient texts and modern questions. She's reading the alphabet of Ben Sirach, the same medieval manuscript that told of Lilith's rebellion, but she's seeing it with new eyes, eyes that have witnessed centuries of women's silence, diminished, erased from their own stories. And suddenly, she understands. What if the rabbis got it wrong? What if the story they told to frighten generations was actually the first tale of liberation? What if Lilith wasn't a demon? What if she was a hero? Feel the shift. Reality is reshaping itself. Plaskow's reinterpretation spread like wildfire through feminist circles. Here was a woman who predated Eve, who knew equality before submission was ever demanded. A woman who chose exile over compromise, freedom over security, truth over acceptance. She was the road not taken. She was the voice that refused to be silenced. In 1976, Jewish feminists launched a magazine, not named after Sarah or Rebecca or Rachel, the acceptable matriarchs who submitted to patriarchal order. They named it after the first woman who said, "No." Lilith magazine. For 3,000 years, Lilith had been the cautionary tale, the example of what happened to women who demanded too much, who refused their place, who spoke truth to power. But suddenly, she became the inspiration. She was a reminder that there had always been another way. Every generation must choose again between submission and freedom. Think about the profound courage this required. Jewish feminists had to reclaim a figure that their own tradition had demonized for millennia. They had to look past centuries of conditioning that painted feminine power as dangerous, unnatural, evil. They had to see past the distortion to the truth underneath. See with their eyes now. Lilith wasn't a child killer. She was a child protector, transformed into a threat by those who feared her power. She was a seductress who corrupted men. She was a free woman who refused to be owned, sexuality incarnate without shame or apology. She wasn't a demon of the desert. She was a goddess of untamed spaces, the divine feminine that would not be caged, contained, or controlled. What Plaskow and her sisters understood was revolutionary. Lilith's story was every woman's story. Every woman who had been told to be smaller, so others could feel bigger. Every woman who had been asked to dim her light, so others wouldn't feel blind. Every woman who had chosen truth over comfort, authenticity over acceptance, self-respect over security. Lilith was the archetype of the woman who refuses to disappear. The movement spread beyond Judaism, beyond feminism, beyond any single community. Neo-pagans embraced her as the dark goddess. Psychologists saw her as the shadow anima that patriarchal societies create when they suppress feminine power. Artists painted her as the wild woman dancing in flames. Feel her resurrection in your bones. But perhaps the most powerful recognition came from the most unexpected place. The realization that her story was not ancient history, but living prophecy. Every generation, she returns. Every time a woman refuses to make herself smaller. Every time, someone chooses authenticity over approval. Every time, the demand for equality meets the resistance of those who benefit from hierarchy. She is the #MeToo movement, refusing silence about assault. She is the woman who won't apologize for her intelligence, her ambition, her sexuality, her power. She is the voice that says, "We are equal, for we both come from the earth." The medieval rabbis tried to use her as a warning. This is what happens to women who demand too much. But their cautionary tale became a battle cry. This is what happens to women who demand exactly what they deserve. Today, Lilith represents a return of the sacred feminine, not the domesticated, sanitized version that poses no threat to existing power structures, but the wild, untamed, uncompromising force that demands justice, equality, and truth. Speak her name without fear. Lilith, the first woman who refused a bow, the first feminist, the first to choose exile over submission, the first to understand that some freedom can only be won by walking away from systems designed to diminish you. The eternal truth revealed. Her message echoes across the millennia, as relevant today as it was in Eden. You were not created to be less than what you are. You were not born to serve someone else's comfort. You were not made to apologize for the space you take up in the world. The woman they tried to erase has never been more alive. If the story echoed something inside you, maybe it was always yours. Subscribe. Some names were never meant to be whispered. They were meant to be proclaimed.